Hi, I'm Alexandra with Minerva. Today we're going to be working on a sewalong for New Looks 6271. This pattern is perfect for a confident beginner. You can make a pair of long pants, shorts, or skirts in 3 different lengths. Makers, this pattern calls for woven fabrics. I've seen a few of you on our website have made this in a stretch fabric. Absolutely, you can do that. Go a little rogue and have some fun. But today we're going to be using a viscose challis, and this is part of Minerva's exclusive fabrics. This is called Jewel Blooms. Lots of fun, lots of color. If perhaps you want something a little bit different, go take a look at our website where we have a load of colors. As always, I'm going to be linking all the notions and fabric that I use on today's sewalong. All right, makers, let's get started. Hi makers, today we're going to be working on a sew-along for New Look 6271 with a size range from 10 to 22. And makers, you have a pair of pants, skirts, and shorts with this pattern, but today we're going to be working on view A, which is the long pants. And makers, 5 pattern pieces. Let me show you those. So you have the front pattern piece number 1, you're going to cut 2. You also have the back pant pattern piece, and that's pattern piece number 2, and you're going to cut 2. You also have pattern piece number 3, and that's the casing. You're going to cut 2. You also have pattern piece number 4, and that's the drawstring, and you're going to cut 2. In makers, you also have pattern piece number 5. It's the elastic. And keep in mind, I usually like to wait to the end to cut my elastic, just with all my my updates on my measurements and my waist. So you have an elastic guide, just use as needed. In makers, you're also going to need, of course, matching thread, 3/4 inch elastic, or 1 meter of 20 millimeter elastic. Don't forget to always label your makes. In makers, this pattern also calls for just a small amount of interfacing for your buttonholes. I'm going to go ahead and, of course, tag all of our notions. And let me tell you about today's fabric. Today's fabric is this beautiful Jewel Blooms Viscose challis. This is part of our Minerva exclusive fabrics and makers. We have so many different prints and colors on this Viscose challis, so perhaps go check out all the other ones that we have on the website. It is absolutely beautiful, soft, very easy to sew, and with great drape, which is perfect for our pair of pants. All right, makers, don't forget to go ahead and cut your fabric, mark your notches, and let's get ready. Let's start. You are going to go ahead and grab pattern piece number 2 and pattern piece number 1, and you are going to find the notch in that middle inner seam. And again, with right sides together, you're going to pin, and I want you to pin all the way down. Makers, I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and all the way to the end, and do that for both left and right sides. Again, you are stitching the inner seams for pattern piece number 1 and 2. Go ahead and do that now. Makers, so I went ahead and stitched my inside seam for my front and my back. And I also went ahead and trimmed my seam allowance, and I also serged it or overlocked it. If you don't have an overlocker, just go ahead and do an overcast stitch on your sewing machine. So now I want you to go ahead and open those pieces that you just sewed together, right? And I want you to do with right sides together, and I want you to start at that center. Make sure that you match that seam right at the middle. And you also have 3 notches for the back right here. And 3 notches. I want you to match those. Pin. And you also have 2 notches for the front pieces. Make sure you match those. Again, pin. Makers, now that we went ahead and pinned, I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance or 1.5 centimeter. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and all the way to the end. Go ahead and do that now. So makers, I went ahead and stitched my crotched curve area, and I also went ahead and serged it. And makers, the pattern doesn't have this, but I usually like to reinforce that crotch curve area. They're just pants. It's just a good thing to do. So now I want you to grab your pants. So they start looking a little bit more like pants, right? So this is my front. And of course, we want to go ahead and with right sides together. I want you to turn your pants inside out. And you have a notch for your side. You're going to pin right there. So makers, I want you now to stitch and pin both sides of your pants. So I want you to stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start and all the way to the end. And I want you to do that for both left and right sides of your pants. Go ahead and do that now. Makers, I went ahead and stitched the sides of my pants, both left and right. I went ahead and also trimmed my seams and serged it. Now I want you to put that off to the side, and I want you to grab piece number 3, and this is your waistband. And remember that piece of interfacing, go ahead and put that piece of interfacing because you're going to be doing buttonholes. And makers, just do it on that front, because keep in mind you're going to be folding this in and stitching it in. So again, just make sure that you put your interfacing on the front piece of your waistband. That's piece number 3, and you're going to be doing on your buttonholes on the right side. All right, makers, go ahead and do that now. So makers, I went ahead and did my buttonholes. There they are. And also don't forget to use a buttonhole cutter. Don't try doing this with your seam ripper. Always use a buttonhole cutter, and don't forget to use some fray check on your buttonholes. I already did that. They dried, and I will go ahead and tag those notions that you should always have. So now I want you to go ahead and grab your other piece, number 3, and with right sides together, I want you to pin both sides. And I want you to stitch 5/8 inch or 1.5 centimeter on both sides, right and left. And don't forget the back stitch at the start and all the way to the end on both sides. Go ahead and do that now. This is piece number 3, the waistband. Makers, so I went ahead and stitched my waistband, and I also went ahead and serged my seams, and then I folded my waistband. So now I want you to grab your pants, and this is my front. I usually put a washi tape for the front, And then I want you to go ahead and match your side seams. There, go ahead and pin. And notice how my waistband is facing down, and I want you to match side seams on both sides. So makers, go ahead and stitch 5/8 inch seam allowance. Don't forget the back stitch at the start, all the way around, and stop at the end. And I want you to leave a gap. I have about 3-inch gap to go ahead and insert your elastic. Go ahead and do that now. Go ahead and stitch your waistband in. So makers, now that I attach my waistband, it's time to go ahead and attach your elastic. And I have what it's called a bodkin. We have these in the site, so I will, along with all of the notions that I'm using today, I will tag those below. And just go ahead and insert your elastic. If you don't have a bodkin, it's okay. You can also use a safety pin to just get your elastic through. All right, makers, so go ahead and make sure that you put your elastic through the waistband and that it's not twisted inside. Go ahead and do that now. So makers, I'm going to go ahead and just attach my elastic onto itself. Just make sure that when you do this, your elastic is not twisted or it's not going like this, right? The elastic is the same direction. I'm going to use a zigzag stitch just so it can stretch, right? Take that pin out. Turn. Turn it again. And that's it. My elastic it's secure. So once I do that, I can just let it go inside the waistband. And now I can go ahead and close my waistband. Just make sure that you are only enclosing the waistband and that you are not sewing through your elastic. So makers, now my elastic is encased in the waistband and I am going to go ahead and trim this seam allowance and also serge it. Go ahead and do that now. Makers, don't forget to label your makes. Always so important to do. Makers, so we went ahead and put in our elastic inside the waistband, and we closed the waistband and I label my make. So now I want you to put this off to the side And I want you to grab your two pieces number 4, and this is your drawstring. And I want you to go ahead that with right sides together. That you pin, and that you take this to your sewing machine and you do a 5/8 or 1.5 inch seam allowance, and that you press this open. Go ahead and do that now. So makers, now that we attached those two pieces of drawstring and we press those in, the pattern wants us to go ahead and stitch them together. And usually what I like to do is I like to grab a piece of thread from my serger and put it in the middle. Kind of close this in. And notice I'm kind of sandwiching it in between. The pattern wants you to keep the ends open, but I'm going to close this off with a couple of stitches and reinforce a couple of times. And we're going to use a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Back stitch. I'm going to back stitch a couple of times to reinforce. And then I'm going to go ahead and sandwich things in. And hold on. Make sure that's, again, that my thread is sandwiched in, 3/8 inch allowance, and that I am stitching that in. And I'm doing this so it's easier to turn in my drawstring. If you don't have a serger, you can use perhaps just something that's a little bit stronger, like a piece of ribbon or perhaps a thin piece of elastic, and just stitch away. Makers, now I just kind of pull gently on my string. So makers, now that I went ahead and pulled my drawstring, I want you to go ahead and give it a good press. And makers, let's say for example that you don't have a serger, you don't have elastic, you don't have a loop turner nearby. There is another option to do your drawstring. Once you attach those two pieces, you can always take your drawstring to your pressing station and you can fold it on itself and then press, right? And then you can fold again, press all the way down, and then take it to your sewing machine and then top stitch. So that's another way that you can do your drawstring if you don't have a serger, if you don't have anything strong nearby. But once you do that, you give it a good press, which I'm going to do now. We are going to go ahead and put it through the casing. Go ahead and do that now. All right, so grab my drawstring. Makers, if you did it the same way I did, make sure that you close your one end that you pulled your drawstring through, and just grab your bodkin. If you don't have a bodkin, just go ahead and grab a safety pin and then just loop it through. So makers, once you do that, all you have left is your hem. So go ahead and put on your pants and go ahead and turn up your hem and turn it in 1/4 of an inch and then top stitch. Once you do that, you're all done. All right, makers, I hope you enjoyed that sew along. I went ahead and tagged all the notions and fabric that I used for this pattern. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them below. And don't forget to sign up for a Minerva Craft Club account. You get a discount on all your orders for 12 months. And also don't forget to join us on our website with a free account where you can share your makes and get inspiration from makers all around the world. All right, makers, I'll see you next time. Bye.